Howdy!
Howdy.
Today I'm going to speak about an oil well incident that happened in the western part of India. The incident is right from the diary of a petroleum engineer, and the petroleum engineer is me, so quite authentic. I'll go through the sequence of events that took place on a day, show a couple of videos, and do role play. We might not have time for questions, but I can take it later if time persists after that. So let's start. On 12th February 2017, I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning and started driving towards my work site, which was an oil well located at about 50 miles away from my home. As I reached the site, it was quite silent and serene. Our generators were switched off, so minimal noise, and there was hardly any wind movement. India, by the way, is one of the very lucky countries in terms of natural forces. And what I mean is that if you estimate number of natural disasters per square foot of land, India will come quite below in the list. The reason for that is because in India there are quite calm seas, relatively stable rivers, predictable weather patterns, and most importantly, the wind is quite weak. So that's one of the first thing I noticed when I came to Texas, that the wind is mighty strong here compared to India. So if you go to India, you would observe that leaves or flowers don't move even for hours. That's why no law of physics has ever been invented in India, because if you sit beneath a tree there, the apple won't fall. How will you discover law of gravity if apple doesn't fall? Anyways, that day, our task was to execute a perforation job on that particular oil well site. A perforation job is basically to punch holes deep beneath the earth's surface to bring the oil out to the surface. Now, the perforation job involves use of explosives such as RDX, and that's why it is carried out by a specialized party. Most of the time it is carried out by oil field service companies such as Halliburton or Schlumberger. But on this particular occasion, our company's own specialized team was going to execute the operation. So I was fairly relaxed because I didn't have much to do. My job was only to coordinate or supervise the operation. The only concern, however, was the lack of air conditioning, because the power is cut off during the operation. And in India, during the summer, staying on the field without air conditioning, a Niagara fall can occur over your face. Just to indicate the level of heat, I find Texas summer to be 20 to 30% cooler than the Indian summer. Now, before I begin, to give you an idea about how a perforation job looks like and how a perforation gun operates, I'll show an animation. So that's how a perforation gun is operated deep beneath the Earth's surface. And the logging party had arrived to execute that operation at about 10 o'clock in the morning. My walkie-talkie started buzzing. Cardwell Alpha, come in, Cardwell Alpha. Go ahead, logging unit. Jay, Bottom found clear. Repeat, bottom clear. Oh, that's good news, Suraj. Someone's going like Michael Schumacher today. Do let me know when you fire that baby gun of yours. Roger that, Jay. Over. Over and out. A dummy tool was run inside the oil well, basically to check whether the bottom is clear or not, because below the oil zone we require a specific amount of sump to carry out the perforation job, otherwise the sand will cave in and choke the entire gun and even the oil zone. So as you mentioned on the walkie, the bottom was found clear, which was a good indication. So we will be able to do our perforation job, otherwise it would have been delayed by a long time. Now the next task was to pull that dummy tool out of the oil well, condition the gun and lower the gun and place it against the oil zone and ultimately fire the charges. But this was going to take some time, so I finished my lunch, did some documentation work, and a few hours later my walkie again started buzzing. Jay, come in, Jay. Go ahead. Detonation completed. Starting pull out. Copy. I looked at the oil well. Everything seemed normal. Informed my electrical engineer to switch on the power supply. I looked at my watch. It was about 1:40 p.m. So my shift was about to end, and I was just patiently waiting for my reliever to land so that I can get out of the heat. And but I had to sign certain documents to close the job. So I was about to go to my bunkhouse, and just then I glanced at the oil well. As the gun was pulled out of the well, a heavy gush of gas followed by water followed by oil started coming out of the well. In a flash of a second, the gush of oil and gas shot up to a 30 feet height. Now, whenever such a situation happens, there are a set of gates installed on top of the oil well, known as the blowout preventers or the BOPs. So I closed the BOP immediately as I was close to the panel, and the vertical flow stopped. But under high pressure, the oil and gas managed to channel through a set of horizontal walls and shot right in the direction of my view, my car. Color of my car turned from white to brown to black in a matter of seconds. Trust me, it's a bad sight seeing your car getting painted. But anyways, it was spewing oil massively, so we had to stop it immediately, otherwise it would create a massive spillage, hamper property, injure someone, but most importantly, it would damage my car, right? So I shouted at one of my men, "Raj, close the walls!" Raj stood there like a statue in Madame Tussauds. So I shouted again, politely, "Raj, close the damn annular walls!" But this time round when I spoke, I realized that my voice was not even audible to me. The blaring oil and gas produced such a deafening sound that made communication very difficult. So ultimately we went back, fetched our earmuffs and closed the walls. The horizontal flow stopped as well. Now I don't have the actual footage from the site because of course cameras are not allowed at oil fields. But I'll show you a clip from the movie Deepwater Horizon if you haven't seen it. I felt that the director of the movie did a great job in simulating the actual oil field operation and the situation. What happened at the Macondo BP Gulf of Mexico blowout was a blowout, and what we had was a kick. So there is a subtle difference. When an abrupt flow of oil and gas comes to the surface, it is called a kick. When you leave the kick uncontrolled and when your barriers to prevent it fail, it turns into a blowout. So it was slightly different, but I feel the video gives you a great idea about how the force and pressure of oil and gas looks like. So let's go.
What's your step over here? What you got, kid? What's he do?
Jason, have you seen this? We got fallout here. It's not stopping. Hey, Jason, are you seeing this? Are they not telling you to do anything? See this kick in with that.
Mike, what is that? Is everything okay?
Closing the indoor. Doc, get in here now! Are you shutting in? All right, we're okay. I closed the indoor. We got 30 seconds.
First of all, that was Hollywood, so everything tends to be a bit exaggerated and amplified. But that's more in terms of effects. Director portrayed in terms of dialogue and story pretty well. It was based on the National Commission's report sent to President Obama. But they were operating at around 7,000 miles below the mean sea level. We were operating at 700 miles below the sea level. And they were in offshore, we were in onshore, so we were babies in comparison to them in terms of complexity. Nevertheless, going back to that site, the flow had stopped, but the well wasn't under complete control. It was a pressure cooker-like situation. We had closed the lids from all the side, but the pressure from beneath the surface will keep on rising. And rising pressure can create a rupture at any point of time, especially if you have got 20-year-old equipment. So to counter this, we use a technique called bullheading in the oil and gas. In bullheading, we pump heavy water or brine and squeeze the oil and gas back into the earth. So we started this process, but it takes time to execute this process. You have to follow many cycles of pressurizing and then bleeding, because we also have to ensure that we don't fracture the formation. So we started this long and arduous process of bullheading. But in the meantime, it was imperative for me to inform the logging team about this bullheading operation, because the gun was still inside the well. So I went to their logging truck, but couldn't find anyone. So I was quite surprised. This logging team normally stays close to their truck, everyone stays together, and no one's here. Where did everyone go? And then one of my men came close by and he said that, "Sir, look there." And then I glanced away and realized that the logging team had fled the site and gone to nearby farmland. So I wondered why this happened. The logging team comprised of some of the great engineers in the company, and they fled the site while my men, who had high school level of education, stayed there and battled the situation. So on pondering about that later on, I found mainly two reasons. First is, we had a rotational training program in place, which is not very common in the oil and gas, even till date. So in the oil and gas, normally what happens is every person is assigned a fixed set of duties as per the standard operating practices or the SOPs, and the person just performs his or her own duty. But we had this kind of a rotational program in place where we taught person about various kinds of duties of other person as well, and this fact helped us during that day. One of the last valves that was closed, so that was done by a mechanical engineer who was not supposed to do that. So that helped. Second reason was a more simpler one, and that was more about the confidence. Confidence is often perceived by people as cause of a performance. Whenever you will see a dancer giving a great performance, people will say, look at her confidence, that's why she gave a great performance. But it is not her confidence, it's years of diligent work that led to that confidence, that created that effect of confidence. And on this occasion, it was the experience of my men, as well as the fact that they had experienced these kinds of risks many a times. It wasn't a new situation to them. And that kept them oiled well and battled the situation pretty well as opposed to the logging team. So next day at about 4 o'clock in the morning, I picked up my walkie and said, logging unit come in for Carwell Alpha. Go ahead, Carwell Alpha. Suraj, full heading completed, surface pressure dropped to 0. No signs of abnormality since last 4 hours. Well under complete control. You may now resume pull out of the gun. I repeat, you may now resume pull out of the gun. Copy, Jai. Over. Over and out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jay. You're a real natural up here. How many of you felt like you were on the oil field with him? Yeah, pretty good stuff, man. Pretty good stuff. Okay, now we've got Koki Tobita from Japan, which you'll understand why I'm saying from Japan, because he's going to be talking about natural disasters, earthquake and tsunami, and who would have more experience with this than someone from Japan, right? Excellent. Okay, Koki, thank you.
Thank you.